Welcome to this special edition of Saving America. This is Dr. David D. Shine, your host, and we've got a full program. As you know, we cover three segments. The first one is In the News, and we talk about the horrendous stealing from our children's children presentation of last week in celebration of him surviving his first 100 days without being removed from office by his own party. And then rumor of the week is regarding something we don't talk a lot about, which is a program to help farmers. But you have to be African-American farmers in order to get the money. And I don't think that's going to sit too well in a colorblind society. And then number three, we have a very special guest in our Just the Facts segment. We have Michaela S Cox. She's a master's degree in political science. She has a special book series called We the People, and we're going to learn a lot more about that in our Just the Facts segment.
You say A, and that's your final answer?
So let's get down to it. Let's talk about In the News with Joe Biden, who gave a speech. They didn't call it a State of the Union speech. It was a little bit different because even though everybody in Congress has been vaccinated, they decided to have social distancing anyway. So normally about 1,000 people attend the State of the Union address by the president. And this time there were about 200 people there. Frankly, it didn't matter because he didn't say anything that was really important. And interestingly, even the mainstream media that tends to kowtow to Biden and his other whack leftist buddies had to comment on the lack of veracity in so many of his statements. And to quote one part, they say, the USA Today, which is certainly not a conservative news source, referred to it as he had got some facts wrong and stretched others, mainly repeated claims we've heard before. So that's a little bit from USA Today. He said he inherited the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. That, of course, is a totally false statement. Things actually were not even as bad as the Great Recession of 08-09. And in fact, the economy was surging back under the leadership of President Trump and the development of the vaccine under his program, Warp Speed. And all of that was in place before Joe wandered into office. And then he also debunked claims that he had traveled 17,000 miles with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Obviously has not done that. But more importantly, I don't know that either he or Putin over in Russia give a darn about Biden. I think that the man has virtually no respect on the international stage. And that's kind of an interesting side note because a lot of people felt that Trump was not respected on the national stage. And I think that was a misunderstanding. Standing strong is sometimes not the way to make friends with the weak leaders around the world. The strong leaders around the world respected Trump, and that's what we need. We don't need people to say, oh, we're whamby-pamby, and we really want a whamby-pamby leader in the White House so we can suck up to him and be part of the little country club operation going on there. That's not how to get things done when you're dealing with existential threats like the Communist Chinese Party and Russia and North Korea and Iran. And so I think people have a misunderstanding of what we need the president to be. Being a nice guy doesn't get the job done. So in any event, he claims that his American jobs plan will create millions of jobs. I don't know what Biden knows about creating jobs. He certainly did not do it under his Obama-Biden 8 years in office. It was a terrible time for the economy and for the jobs market. And so I really doubt that he can deliver. Further, he hasn't provided any details. And, as they say, the devil's in the details. And then he said he's going to restoring programs to address the causes of migration. Now, let's get down to it. Basically, it is not broke America's responsibility, broke on the way to a $30 trillion national deficit. And we have a situation where we are spending far more than we are taking in. And he is saying, gee, we need to throw some money at Central America so that their people don't come to the United States. I'm not unsympathetic to the cause of these impoverished countries, many of them dominated by years of failed socialist governments, and they have blown through millions and millions of dollars to no good end. And I hate to see us dump more money without having a clear path to get things done. Furthermore, just securing the border by itself accomplishes a great deal. If people do not think they can just walk into this country, which many of them are presently doing, hundreds of thousands of them since Biden made his foolhardy pronouncements, then that to me is the short-term answer. Long-term, certainly we can be good neighbors to our Central American colleagues. And I do not oppose that in itself, but I have to wonder how much money do we have left over from some of the other programs that they have thrown money at over the last so many years. And then Biden falsely claims that 11 million of the undocumented folks in the United States have overstayed their visas. That is a patently false statement. Even USA Today agrees with me on that. And the estimate is that there are 30 million illegals in the United States at this time, not 11 million, a number that's been trolloped out by the silly folks repeatedly. And we need to do something about that. He also claimed that the assault weapons ban was a great success. That actually has not been borne out by studies. And I'm not a big fan of people running around with assault weapons, but I think we need to again and again focus on the cause of mass violence. And I believe it starts with having a calmer, more cohesive society, and certainly not one as divisive as the Biden leadership has indicated to this point. And the Wall Street Journal described his speech as making the middle class dependent on the government, cradle to grave. And I think that's probably a pretty accurate statement. One of the very sad aspects of the evening, by the way, was Senator Tim Scott, African-American, as all of you know, gave the Republican rebuttal to Biden's poorly done speech and factually inaccurate speech. And he was criticized by the left because the left feels that if you are someone of color, that you cannot ever support the Republican Party. And they made some very, very racist, not just unkind, but racist comments regarding Tim Scott's rebuttal. And I take umbrage at that as an American, not as a conservative, but as an American. And I think we need to start playing by better rules on both sides of the aisle. And I think that's something we need to hold people's feet to the fire.
You are the weakest link. Goodbye.
Let's switch gears to rumor of the week. And this is a fascinating story. Is the Biden administration, without a lot of press coverage, snuck in a deal where they decided to have a farm support program. And Americans farmers are important to our economy. They're important to our wonderful food supply that we enjoy in this country. And there are many small farmers out there who can use support. But what happened recently is there's a new legal group called the America First Legal Foundation, and they represent that they're going to be out there balancing the ACLU, the so-called American Civil Liberties Union, which has unfortunately devolved into a pretty useless political operation. It did have good goals about 100 years ago, and not so much anymore, unfortunately. But in any event, the AFLF has filed a lawsuit alleging racial discrimination against the Biden administration on behalf of farmers and ranchers who are not people of color, but who were left out of this farms program that was part of the American Rescue Act. And so this is a pretty interesting debate going on out there right now. And I'll be interested to see what the courts do with that. And it's interesting because we do have affirmative action programs. There are certain things that are approved by the courts that do show preference to certain minorities and females and so forth. And I don't know if this particular bill would fall under that or not, but it's something that I think we should watch for.
Just the facts, ma'am.
And welcome to our Just the Facts interview this week with Michaela S Cox. She holds a master's degree in political science and is a prolific author with her series on We the People. She's also been published 4 times in the International Journal of Social Science Studies. And I'm not going to say more about her because my very first question for you is, tell us a little bit about your background. You've had a pretty wild background, haven't you?
Yes, I have. Do you mean personally or professionally, like how I got into my love of political science?
How about both?
All right, political science. I was raised with a mom. I love her, but she watched C-SPAN. And she watched Capital Gang, and she watched Crossfire, and summer of '87, when I was like between 2nd and 3rd grade, we couldn't leave the house until she watched the Iran Contra Oliver North hearings on C-SPAN. I'm like, oh my God. I was like 8. So I was like, can we just leave already? I didn't get how important it was at the time. So I grew up around it in the sense of my mom's passion for it. And I was a weird kid. I wrote my first editorial in 2nd grade about how I thought it was wrong to burn the American flag. Yeah. I mean, what kid in 2nd grade writes an editorial, and never mind on politics? So I've always kind of been around it. I've always thought it was important. I played with the idea of doing something with an undergraduate, and I ran out of time. So I thought, well, since I couldn't do it at undergraduate, I'll do my master's in it. So that's how I kind of got to the road of, our government and all that jazz. As far as personally, I call it my 38 Triple D. A journey of learning how to go from much tribulation to thriving in all things, a lifelong disability of legal blindness, divorced at 26. And then when I was 38, 4 years ago, I lost my husband, love of my life. And I am now a widow and solo mom and a writer and speaker.
Wow, what a situation. I understand you're originally from Texas.
Yes, and that's what I claim.
Okay, but you presently are in Louisiana.
Yes, I am.
And I understand you're dealing with some weather there, but hopefully it's going to turn out okay for you. And we're going to move this along as quickly as we can so that if we do get interrupted by a power shortage, we'll still have some usable material. And tell our audience about your book series, We the People. What was the inspiration for it? And tell us a little bit about it. That's great.
Oh, it's turning around. Sorry. I will admit I'm actually registered as Republican, but I'm more conservative than anything. And above all else, I'm a constitutionalist first and foremost, and I'm conservative, but in the political parties, I've actually been ruffling my feathers for a long time. But what I would like people to understand is, and I think the importance of it, whether you are Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative, whatever, middle of the road, moderate, independent, Green Party, I don't really care. We, as members of we the people individually, but together collectively as a nation, because it is made up of individuals who come together as a nation to represent we the people as a whole, have to understand whether you agree with them or don't. But it's like football or soccer or baseball or basketball. You're not getting on that field or that court and be able to play the game well if you don't understand the rules and respect the rules. We have to understand the rules of our country if we want to be able to keep our country and understand what it is we're exactly supposed to be defending, protecting, and preserving. If we don't know what we got, we don't know what we're supposed to be doing. And so my goal is to at least inform people of the rules and understand the value, the importance, the profound, immense, paramount importance of we the people. That is the whole point of our country. If you don't get that, you don't get America, which is why, excuse me, that is not only in the beginning of our Constitution, it is the first 3 words of our Constitution. It is in those words that sums up America. There's a lot more to it than those 3 words, but those 3 words say it all. And I wanted in this book to explain and impress upon people and educate people and empower people to understand the meaning of, the value of, the place of, the role of, and the importance of we the people. Because you have to start there if you want to understand America. I'm not asking you to agree. I'm not asking you to be in support of it in the sense of you may want to go change the rules, fine. But you have to understand the rules first before you can figure out what you're going to do and be able to play well in this country, or at least the way this country should work.
And tell us about, how many books are in the series?
This is the first one, and I've already outlined the second one that I will have come out in 2022, which will take a person, a reader, part by part of the Constitution. And I'm playing with the title right now. And then that's what I'm working on for that series.
Okay. And it is available on Amazon.
This one is correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
In paperback and in ebook.
Very good. Excellent. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about what inspired you to do this. Obviously, I mean, you have you know, from your mom, you got this rather incredible introduction into political life. The Iran-Contra hearings, some of these things sound like you know, watching paint dry, but there were some very important pieces in the things that you mentioned. And
the 8-year-old at the time, it was paint drying, but not so much as the adult. I could appreciate why she did what she did, but at 8, you're like, oh my God, I just want to go play, you know. And then she watched, of course, you know, Clarence Thomas being, you know, confirmed. And then, you know, in my adult life, I watched Kavanaugh be confirmed, and I watched the impeachment hearings, which in my opinion were total bullcrap, but whatever. That's, I'm trying to remain unbiased, but this is my soapbox.
Yeah, well, we've all experienced an awful lot of nonsense out of Washington, and it's you know, it's interesting because you know, understand that there's you know, a challenge to one of our most fundamental institutions, the Supreme Court, with this current administration, and yet I don't hear any big public drive to change the Supreme Court. And it does, and it's interesting because I heard one of the possible proposals is to implement term limits. And I can tell you that, speaking as a constitutionalist and as a very fundamental person, I would have liked to have seen Ruth Bader Ginsburg out of there a long time ago.
No kidding. Oh,
so,
oh my gosh,
so,
I cannot. Oh, she aggravated the dickens out of me. I'm like, whatever.
But understanding the Constitution also tells us the reason that we didn't put term limits in was kind of interesting, because the founding fathers had a fundamental concern that they wanted the federal court system to be independent of politics. And as you said, doesn't matter, you know, Republican, Democrat, Green Party, we're all joined together in this incredible experiment. So it's pretty interesting, you know, the way this thing has developed. One of the things that I know that you address is this whole issue of what we call wokeism, and I wonder what you see as as the cure for that, if you will, or how you see the United States recovering from the current debacle and the CRT stuff and all that.
Quite honestly, we're going to have a change of leadership. My prayer is right now we can make it another 18 months till we get to midterm elections, but that's neither here or there. As far as where we're at, I do think on something you were saying a second ago, we, as much as term limits may be good, but because of the court, I don't know if constitutionally that's the best idea. But the reason why people aren't saying anything about it is because I think in our society, a lot of people don't truly get how important each piece is. And so they don't pay it any attention, so they don't think anything about it. So it's not a big deal to them when really all of it's a big deal, and it would make major difference one way or the other depending on how it would be altered. And this idea that they were talking about around the election of a packed court, oops, sorry, big thunder there, packed court, that's not a new idea. The people who are in favor of that have been tossing that idea around since FDR. It's nothing new under this political sun. Do I agree with it? No, but that wasn't a shocker. That's like when they can't get what they want, that's the card for the court they always play. It's not a new idea in our country. So for everyone who is all whatever about it, I'm like, go read a history book. That's been around forever. They're just trying to find a way to get around the legitimate way of doing things in this country, and then they're going to make it what they want or take their political toys and go home. As far as what's going on in our country, I don't think we're headed in the right direction anymore, but that's my opinion. And we're going to have a change of leadership and priorities if we want to fix it, in my opinion, but that's up to we the people.
Yeah, so I'll be kind of interested. A quick final question. I wanted to ask you, you are in an interesting state. Texas, of course, has been a fairly conservative state for, I guess right about 30 years now. And then Louisiana is a state that has elected a Republican governor, but has usually had Democrat governors.
Our current governor is Democrat right now.
Right, but New Orleans is a city famously,
Right.
Out on the liberal side, and yes. I don't know a lot about Baton Rouge, but of course, many of us read All the King's Men about Huey Long, and so it's pretty interesting, and of course, you have a Republican senator who is in the news quite a bit, especially on Fox and Newsmax. So it sounds like you have quite a melting pot there in the state of Louisiana.
Well, what people don't really realize about Louisiana is because when you hear Louisiana, you think New Orleans, you think Cajun, you think Kunas, you think, Lafayette, you think below, like that Acadian, very French Creole culture or whatever, which Louisiana is kind of a weird mixture. It's like you get below a certain point and you do have that Southern culture, South Louisiana culture everyone thinks about, but above that line in the state, the rest of the state's not really like that. It's very, I would say, more bland and more traditional and more kind of conservative and, more Southern Baptist as opposed to Catholic. Not saying there's anything wrong with Catholic. It's just the demographics of the state or other Protestant religions, denominations. So it's you have half of a state that's one way and you have the bottom half, which is totally opposite direction. And a lot of people don't realize that. So it's kind of an interesting mix to play with. And Louisiana and Texas in and of themselves are not alone in this. You have the East Coast and the West Coast who tend to be more liberal. You have Middle America who's either moderate or conservative. But what a lot of people don't realize is when you have a state that may be small but are pulled a certain direction, not that Texas is really that small. You're correct. Texas has been conservative for a long time. But what the liberals know to be true, if they can get Austin and turn Texas, they'll have currently, I don't know what the Electoral College votes will end up being after the 2020 census, but currently in the 2020 election, Texas had 38 electoral votes. If they can turn that state to liberal, that means they'll get not only probably New York and California, but they'll get another 38 in their column. And that's why they're so desperate for Texas to turn when traditionally and historically Texas has been conservative. And what you find in a lot of these states, you have one huge populous area that's liberal, and it taints what the state really is because you see that one big cluster and you think that state's that certain political leaning when it's really not.
Well, you make a good point there. And it's been great visiting with you. As you know, we try and keep these short, frankly, so that our audience will watch what we provide. And I wanted to tell people that they have a chance to get a lot more information about you from your website, which is myheartfeltmeditations.com.
Correct.
And we're delighted to have you with us today, and I hope you do well with the weather outside. I know there's been some pretty bad damage from hurricanes and tornadoes through Louisiana. I hope this is not one of them today.
Yeah, me too. And we're back in hurricane season. Like, oh dear God, please not again, not like last year. But I would like to add one thing before we go, because this is something
Sure.
you mentioned and I meant to mention it. I felt like part of the reason why the election went the way it went in 2020 is I felt like, since we talked a lot about the judicial branch, I feel like personally the judicial branch let this country down and members of We the People down, because they, for whatever reason, I don't know how they think, I don't know what the evidence was, I don't know what the case was, but they, I feel like, let We the People down, and they did not come to the aid of the wishes of We the People and ensure that We the People integrity of their voices were delivered in that election, because they chose not to intervene to ensure that there was integrity. And the one main way that we the people get to exercise our voice in this country. And I felt very disappointed in that, and I felt like they let the whole country down.
Well, I certainly agree with you, and I'm still bemused about the fact that we the American people, saw video
Yep.
of bogus ballots being pulled out from a table in the state of Georgia, one of the critical areas in the election, and somehow a judge says that wasn't relevant. And
Right.
I'm still, scratching my head over that. So we certainly agree.
The ones
On
that know
this.
what's what are all scratching their heads, because there was too much evidence, not just in Georgia, Pennsylvania, and some of the other major states. I believe it was Michigan and Arizona, and I'm trying to think because it's been a while. Another one on that list that should have been action taken, and it was just like it was dropped. And the
Absolutely.
lawsuit that several of the states are trying to get together, the courts refused to take it up. That it was a good, strong faith effort that could have done something, and they chose to not acknowledge it and not run with it,
Well, I
not even let it be
certainly
heard.
agree with you. Well, this is today's edition of Saving America, and we very much appreciate you joining us. And I hope people will take a look at your website.